The kickoff rule was definitely the most viral news to come out of the owners' meetings, but there was another one on the defensive side of the ball. It's something that we talked about with the three of us when I was last hosting the hip drop tackle. The NFL has since banned that form of tackling. The new rule states that the referee will issue a 15-yard penalty with an automatic first down for a tackle, quote, when a player grabs the runner with both hands or wraps the runner with both arms, and B, unweighs himself by swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing and trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee. Very specific. I didn't even know unweighed themselves was an actual word, but apparently it is according to the NFL. So, Dudes, is this specific enough? Does the language actually indicate that this is what they want to happen? Just give me your first thoughts on all this.
Tyler and Brady, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And again, I know people will say you're a defensive-minded guy. We know the league is offensive-based. They want more scoring and everything. And this is another rule that is slanted on the offensive side. But Brady, how are defenders supposed to do their job, right? Because say you're next to a guy or he's even in front of you. How do you tackle him and slow him down to prevent him getting extra yards without, as Tyler would say, they said, unweight yourself? Like you, I didn't know that was a word until yesterday that they started using that word, unweight yourself. That's a new term for me. So is hip drop is a new term for me as well. Because to me, that was always just a regular tackle. Like people talk about the Mark Andrews injury. And if you look at it, Logan Wilson was in the pile with everybody else. He was, getting out the stack of the pile, trying to run Mark Andrews down. And he literally was behind him. How else is he supposed to stop Mark Andrews from getting extra yards without dropping his weight to bring him down? I get you want to minimize and mitigate injuries in the NFL. But like I was saying about the kickoff rule, we tend to forget this is a physical game. This is why people love this game so much, because it differs from so many other sports that people watch. The physical nature, the warrior nature, and that is getting taken out of this game. It's already so hard to play defense. We talked about this before, Brady. Like after 5 yards, DBs can't touch receivers. Right now, DBs can't even cut offensive tackles out in the open space, right? But yet, on the offensive line, on the backside, offensive tackles can still cut defensive linemen, right? Again, something slanted towards the offense. And then the rule that had everybody up in arms was the roughing the passer rule, right? And I think it's because it's subjective, right? There's no clear-cut black and white rule to where a ref should or shouldn't call something. That's the same thing with this. It's subjective to the ref, and you put the refs in a terrible position to make potential calls because they don't know the black and white rule to this as well. Not only that, Brady and Tyler, that the NFL talked about fining players for making this tackle, for doing their regular job, taking food off their plate. So, again, this is ridiculous. Brady, you brought up something that was really good earlier in the show, saying how the scoring was down. And I think this is part of another reason to get more points up because, once you get this personal foul, you get a 15-yard penalty, and you get a first down, which means they get another bite of the apple on offense, which gives the offense another possession on the field. So as a defender, I don't even know how guys are supposed to do their jobs because now they're thinking, Brady, instead of just playing and reacting off of instinct, they're thinking, how do I tackle this guy? Because if I tackle him the wrong way, not only am I hurting my team, I'm losing money in my pocket to provide for my family.
Yeah, it's really forcing defenders once again to have to adjust for the sake of player safety. And that seems to be the route that the NFL always goes. It's a bit lazy. I think when you look at it, Deuce and Sully, you have to understand, how do we get here? The game's more spread out than it's ever been before. And because of that, you get more angle tackles. These angle tackles have led to defenders who already aren't tackling as well as they used to back in the old days, in part because they're going up against more skilled defenders in space. That's a piece of it. But also because we don't have as much hitting as we used to. It's not as a trained technique the same way we used to, and we're teaching it a different way. We're teaching more of a rugby-style tackle. And that rugby-style tackle that the NFL was basically so adamant to introduce back after 2010 when all the storylines came out about CTE and the fear for the long-term, of the league remaining intact and correlating it with head injuries and CTE and football and the way we're tackling. It's led us to this rugby-style tackle. We're trying to take the head out of football. Well, unfortunately, that's now led us to the hip drop tackle because guys are taking angles that force them to have to put their head on one side or the other when they're using their shoulders and they're trying to wrap and roll. Well, if you end up, picking wrong and the defender's ahead of you, or excuse me, the ball carrier's ahead of you and you put your head opposite on his backside of it, you can't do anything else other than try to grab onto that ball carrier, use all of your weight to stop his momentum moving forward since you're not in front of him, and try to bring him down. And that's really the job of any defender. So it's tough, especially when you see the NFLPA came out against this in the first place, which you very rarely see when it comes to a player safety issue. I know there's a lot of players who are advocating for this being penalized, being outlawed. The reality is where does it stop? It's going to be really, really hard for defenders to do their job in the future and not get penalized or not get fined. And it only leads to more subjectivity amongst officials. That leads to more frustration amongst the fans.
Well, not only where it stops, but what is the
Tyler,
domino
before you
effect?
go, I was thinking to add,
Go
to
ahead,
add
go
this
ahead,
part, right? Now, guys, instead of, like you said, Brady, guys are going to be shooting at ankles and knees and trying to roll instead of trying to bring guys down with the quote unquote hit drop tackle. So we saw it, Brady. I also saw that you reposted Jonnu Smith. He said, we're fine, with the rule. He's like, we don't need to change the rules. Change the turf on the field instead of the hip drop tackle. Because I think players understand, more so receivers and tight ends, that now guys are going to adjust, right? Now they're going to be diving at ankles and knees and rolling. And as the player on the offensive side, you're worried about your long-term health because guys are thinking how they should tackle guys instead of just acting off of instinct and doing what comes naturally. So I would not be surprised. Again, I don't want to put this in the air, but, injuries could potentially even go up now because now guys not only don't want to hurt their team, they don't want to get fined and lose money. So now, by the letter of the law, they're going to just start going low on guys.
Yeah, dude, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think that that's exactly where we're kind of trending. Brady, you were talking about they want to eliminate head injuries, and then you go down to the hip, and now where are we at? We're at knees and ankles, and that's something that could be really detrimental for players on all sides here. The one thing that I thought was interesting is that the league doesn't believe that it will be flagged that much. Do we believe them, or do we think that this is something that we're going to see a lot every Sunday?
I mean, that's the hard part, is it depends on the officiating crew, right? Yeah. We have some officiating crews who we all look at holding. We all can tell what holding is, but during the course of a game in an instant, you have to make a call whether or not really that holding impacted the play. Like, that's the interpretation of it, is if it's on the backside of an outside run to the right and it's on the left-hand side of the offensive line, probably not calling it if they don't feel like it impacted the play in any way. But if it's to that right side on an outside zone where it forces the defender not to be able to make the tackle and it ends up leading to it, you gain in yards, you're probably getting that flag. But again, it depends on the crew we're talking about. So that's the tough part, is we always see these rules put in print. How they're then applied becomes something else. And I think the one thing I'm a little bit curious about, and I know this is the first year for this rule, so this is probably why they're not doing it, is if you dive into what they did with intentional grounding and what they did with, for example, roughing the passer, they've allowed the NFL replay assistant to basically correct the call. That should be what the NFL is focusing on. That should be where the NFL is trying to eliminate any sort of subjectivity out of a lot of the officiating in the NFL and apply that to almost every call if you can. Very similar to college football on how they've implemented the replay process. Call it player safety, call it whatever you want, but the reality is these officials need help in real time, especially as they continue to create more and more rules in limiting what players can do.